What happens when a former TV news anchor joins the other side and starts a campaign to tell the truth? Well, the left freaks out and does everything it can to shut him up. They swatted him. They condemned him on social media. They did everything they could to silence him. It didn't work.
Your show's a big hit. It's a big success. You do fantastically. Your ratings are great, and we're very proud of you.
This is Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags.
Welcome to this edition of Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags, where we break down the lies of the left, the lies of the media. We're unafraid to do that. They couldn't shake me by targeting our house and having us swatted and all that other stuff. They couldn't get rid of me by ghost banning, shadow banning, and suspending completely on social media. So we're just going to keep on calling them out because that's what you expect me to do. I am a journalist by trade. I'm not in my radio show as an editorialist, but we always bring you the actual information, the actual truth, the actual fact before we ever even think about giving an opinion. So let me show you the way that the fake legacy lefty progressive news tries to give you information and make you believe what they're saying to be true. This is from a CNN story about the visit of the Prime Minister of Canada, newly minted, to the Oval Office with President Trump. Just the way it is, Trump says Canada's Prime Minister can do nothing to reduce tariffs today, written by Elizabeth Buchwald and David Goldman over at CNN. So as we scroll through this story, we start to realize how biased it is. President Donald Trump, in his first Oval Office meeting with new Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, said there was nothing Carney could say to him Tuesday that would convince the president to reduce tariffs on Canadian goods. So far, so good. So far, it's almost like reporting a story. No, Trump said, just the way it is. Trump complained that Canada has treated the United States unfairly. In a Truth Social post before he met with Carney, the president repeated some of his previous grievances about the country. Quote, why is America subsidizing Canada by $200 billion a year, in addition to giving them free military protection and many other things? Trump posted, citing a baseless claim. What? That's not reporting. You can't call it baseless unless you tell me why it's baseless. Maybe they tell us why it's baseless coming. Let me see if they do. Citing a baseless claim, quote, we don't need their cars, we don't need their energy, we don't need their lumber, we don't need anything they have other than their friendship. Trump's $200 billion claim is not even close to true. Official U.S. statistics show the 2024 deficit with Canada in goods and services trade was $35.7 billion. What? So he just blows off the $200 billion claim by President Trump by saying it's really $35.7 billion. Never, ever asking the further question, where are you getting that number? Because I know where he got the number. He is making that claim by including the military support we give to Canada. Nobody can invade Canada because of us. Nobody could ever dare try something with Canada because we will protect them. They're our little brother to the north. And we just do it out of the goodness of our hearts. And it costs a lot of freaking money. That's where the Trump administration is getting the $200 billion number. It's trade, $35.7 billion in deficits, surplus for Canada, and free military. And Carney's walking around like Bobby Badass, like, he's on an even playing field with Trump. He's not. We go back to the story now that I've shown that baseless claim that it was baseless. Meanwhile, Canada was the top buyer of American goods last year. Carney acknowledged that saying Canada is the largest client of the United States, so it would benefit the United States to restore free trade with its northern neighbor. But he agreed with Trump that the trade deal likely wouldn't be announced Tuesday as a result of their discussions. Even though the United States imports more from Canada than it exports, the two countries have found mutual benefits from trading with one another, the writers write. In particular, sourcing raw materials and produce that are not native to both countries. By contrast, Trump's tariffs on Canada are poised to hurt both countries. You got to love that. Now the writer's just going to tell you, I'm telling you as a fact, Trump's tariffs are hurting both countries. Not why Trump's doing the tariffs, not that it's a leverage play to make Canada stop over-tariffing us, not to make sure it's reciprocal where we're charging each other the same amount of money. Period. End of story. Trump's tariffs are bad for both countries. They say it because they know that those who decide to read CNN will believe it. Let me get back to it. Again, it's good. They're poised to hurt both countries. Currently, most Canadian goods exported to the U.S. are subject to a 25% tariff if they aren't compliant with the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, a trade deal Trump inked during his first term. There are also 25% tariffs in place on steel, aluminum, cars, and auto parts. Canada, meanwhile, is taxing roughly $43 billion worth of U.S. goods, including whiskey, sporting gear, and household appliances. You'll notice what they did here. It's a little non-journalistic twist and a little trickery, so that those of you watching and listening don't get it. Instead of saying the percentage of tariffs that Canada's putting on our goods, they gave a number. Canada is taxing $43 billion in American goods, while Trump and his horrible tariffs that will harm both countries is charging 25%. They don't mention the almost 300% tariff on dairy once it hits a certain level coming from the United States to Canada. Why is Canada doing that? To protect their dairy farmers in Canada. So why can't we do the same thing to protect our dairy farmers or our automakers or our widget makers or whatever? Back to the story. Despite Trump saying it would be much better for Canada to become an American state, Carney told Trump, Canada is not for sale. The prime minister said it was not up for negotiation, but urged the president to work with him on negotiating lower tariffs. Respectfully, Canadians' view on this is not going to change on the 51st state, Carney said. Is there one thing I can say? No, this is a bigger discussion. There are much bigger forces involved, and this will take some time and some discussions, and that's why we're here to have those discussions. They, of course, don't say what Trump said in response. I mean, I'm looking at later. They don't even do it there. Trump said, never say never. Carney said it's never going to happen. Trump said never say never. But that's not what the meeting is about. CNN omits that, which is a non-journalistic move to trick you into exactly what they want you to believe and not to learn the truth. I'm going to keep on bringing this out, going to keep on showing you the light when it comes to what these outlets are doing. Now, let's get back to the big interview. The big interview is with Roger Stone on this episode. Welcome to Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. Today, my guest is Roger Stone. You probably know Roger Stone's name, and you probably have some sort of a visceral reaction, either positive or negative. I'm here to tell you he's a great guy who's been involved with a lot of political campaigns for decades and decades in this country. He's a guy who was raided by the FBI in the early morning hours. Frogmen came to his house to scare him and his wife on charges that were kind of ridiculous. Eventually, he was pardoned by President Donald Trump. Roger Stone is a man, though, who became a lightning rod a long time ago. How did he get his start? Why is he involved as he is? What does he know about Nixon and Reagan and JFK and LBJ? In fact, he's got a book out where he lays the blame for the assassination of JFK on the then vice president, if you can believe it. LBJ, listen, I live in Texas. People in Texas think LBJ is all that and then some. So I wanted to sit down with Roger Stone. I wanted to talk to him at length, not some short 5-minute audio and video, not some short interview where you ask a gotcha question. I wanted to know, where'd you come from? Why are you involved like this? And why should we believe you? And he makes a case very, very simply and very easily as to why I trust him. I think you will too. His is a name that you've heard in politics for a very long time, and he's a guy who's very, very smart. He's been with Nixon. He's been with Reagan. He's been with Trump. He's been, I think, Bob Dole as well. I'm talking about Roger Stone, of course, the amazing Roger Stone. How are you, brother? Good to see you.
Joe, great to be with you as always.
Man, it's such an incredible time to be alive, but you've gone through so many different stages of politics in your career. I can't believe some of the pictures I see with you and Reagan. First of all, you don't look like you changed at all. You look exactly the same through all these years. But tell me if you don't mind, because my audience keeps on asking me, where did Roger Stone come from? Why does he have so much influence, and how did he get started? Roger, take me down that road. How did you get started?
Sure, it's very simple. I grew up in a rural area outside of New York City in Connecticut. And the lady who lived next door to us was very active in the Republican Women's Club. She gave me a book by Barry Goldwater entitled Conscience of a Conservative. Up till that time, Joe, I wanted to be an actor.
Wow.
In which case, I clearly would have starved to death. But once I read that book, I knew I was a conservative. And everything that Goldwater believed in, small, limited government, strong national defense, limited taxation, personal property rights, were all the things that I believed in, particularly fervent anti-communism. I'm half Italian and half Hungarian. I like to say I'm Italian from the waist down. But I, I had relatives, family members mowed down by Russian tanks in Budapest in
Oh
1956.
wow.
I hate communism, and of course, I later married a Cuban American whose family was destroyed by Castro. So, anti-communism was one of the things that brought us together. It's also why I decided to get engaged in politics. Goldwater was my first hero, my first crush, as it were. As I got a little older, I began to understand that he'd gone out of his way to lose the presidency. He'd run a terrible campaign. I wrote a letter to former Vice President Nixon, who was then in exile practicing law in New York. I told him I thought he'd been cheated, and that if he decided to try to make a comeback to get back in the fight, that I wanted to help. 2 years later, his office contacted me and brought me in for an interview. I went to work for him. Worked in the 1972 reelection, which was, up until that time, the greatest single comeback in American political history because he had lost the presidency by a whisker in 1960. He'd made a disastrous race for governor of California in 1962. He was considered to be dead as a doornail.
Right.
Then the combination of the murder of John F. Kennedy, the murder of Senator Robert Kennedy, the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King, and the unpopularity of the war in Vietnam parted the seas in a way to provide the opportunity for his comeback. His presidency, frankly, is underrated. He got us a strategic arms limitation agreement with the Russians. He desegregated the public schools. He ended the war in Vietnam. He ended the military draft. He gave us the 18-year-old vote. He launched the war on cancer. He saved Israel from utter annihilation in the 1973 Yom Kippur War. All of that, of course, is buried in the ashes of Watergate by the left. And now we know, Joe, based on declassified CIA documents, that this was a takedown, just as the murder of JFK was a takedown. This was a bloodless coup. They tried to do it later to Ronald Reagan. By the way, that is my next book about the attempted assassination of Reagan, the true story of which has never been told by the government. They tried later with Donald Trump. They tried twice. It may not be the same people, but it is the exact same institutions.
It is Roger Stone. Roger, I want to get into a lot of what you just said in depth in a second, but let's go from you sent a letter to somebody to all of a sudden 2 years later you're like helping out and you're in their ear. So how does that unfold? You send a letter. I'm a conservative. I want to take part. I want to help out. I want to be involved. And it takes 2 years and somebody contacts you back. Was it that simple? You sent a letter and they said, let's contact this guy who wanted to be an actor? I mean, again, how do you get from point A to point B?
Well, I went into New York City for an interview. I must say they were shocked because at that point I was 16 years old.
Wow.
They were expecting someone much older, I guess, based on the tone of my letter. But look, I said, I'll do anything. I can help. So I got a job essentially as a gopher for John Mitchell, who was Nixon's law partner, later Attorney General, I think wrongly convicted in Watergate, went to his grave insisting that he never approved the Watergate break-in.
Right.
But I was able to meet all of the greats of the party of that time. But because Nixon and Ronald Reagan both came from Southern California, from the same political milieu, they had the same large donors, they had many of the same advisors,
Right.
many of the same staff members. I was able to extrapolate my time working for Nixon into a job with Ronald Reagan in our failed insurgent attempt to wrest the Republican nomination from Gerald Ford. Once I had made that connection, I was rehired for Reagan's 1980 campaign, handling New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, where my specialty was working class Catholic white Democrat voters.
Yes.
Which, of course, later becomes the key constituency in Reagan's election, also the key constituency in Trump's election. And from there, of course, during Reagan's 1980 campaign, I met this New York businessman, this real estate mogul named Donald Trump. And I initially pitched him to join our finance committee. And once he and his father both agreed to raise $100,000 for Reagan, that was in 1979. It's big money in 1979.
Oh, yeah.
Well, then Trump was like a guy who made an investment. He was checking in on his investment every couple of days. He was actually at Reagan's table at the Waldorf Astoria the night Reagan formally announced his candidacy. We became very good friends. By 1988, I realized that Donald Trump himself had the size. I don't mean the physical size, but I mean the stature,
Yes.
the independence, the courage, the stamina to be not just a great presidential candidate, but to be a great president. So, look, I'm a veteran now of 13 national presidential campaigns.
Amazing.
The single most impressive one has to be that of Donald Trump. Prior to Donald Trump, as you know, Joe, all of our presidents had either been senators, governors, congressmen, or generals. We never had a business person elected president. We also never had a candidate who was as authentic and as genuine as Donald Trump. Here's a guy, I mean, we'd have begged him to use a teleprompter, first of all. He eschewed the teleprompter all through the 2016 campaign until he was nominated. And then, frankly, it was Paul Manafort, Manaforte, in Italian that means the strong hand, by the way, who convinced him to just try it once. Just try it once. And of course, Trump did try it once. He loved it. And he's used the teleprompter since then. What I love is the way you can always tell when he goes off the teleprompter.
Yes.
When he decides to tell a story or to make an observation. The reason people, I think, watch him, I think one of the reasons people love him is they realize how authentic he is, how genuine he is. In other words, this is not a politician reading the words of some 25-year-old speechwriter.
Right.
This is Donald Trump right from the heart. That's why people love him so much.
It is Roger Stone. Well, Roger, let me stop you. I want to reset who you are because people are loving what you're saying. It's Roger Stone. Go to stonezone.com or go to whokilledkennedy.com. He's got a book out, and I want you to go and get it. This is what it looks like. New York Times bestseller, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ by Roger Stone with Mike Colapietro. Go and get that right now. And again, go to whokilledkennedy.com. Everything you just said launched about 32,000 questions in my mind. I want to go back to Nixon for a second. I believe you when you say he was a very good president. Let me ask you this. Who was in his ear and didn't tell him the right direction to not react to Watergate like he did? If he doesn't act like he did, he's fine. I don't think he gets impeached. I don't think he resigns. I know he didn't get impeached. He resigned before he did. But I don't think he's out of office. I don't think they push him out if he just plays it cool. He wasn't behind this. He didn't make them go and do it. He should have realized it, said, yeah, we're going to prosecute who did it. Not a big deal. They were trying to get some Democrat, Oppo research, and they did the wrong thing. If he stands back from it, Roger, doesn't he survive that?
Yes, but the problem, Joe, is that he's misled by John Dean for 19 months.
Gotcha.
John Dean is the man who planned, pushed, and then covered up the Watergate break-in. By the way, when other people have said that, he sued them. John Dean, here I am. Please come sue me. I dare you. I challenge you. He knows I can prove every bit of it.
Right.
So for 19 straight months, Dean says, Mr. President, no one in the White House was aware of this. No one was in this loop. That was, of course, a lie. The guy who was in the loop was John Wesley Dean. And once he realized that the dam was going to break, he reinvented himself as a whistleblower,
Gotcha.
Which is, of course, a nonsense because the break-in was his idea to begin with. And the real reason
this guy who was Deep Throat, Roger, he's now dead. The guy Felt. The guy who was Deep Throat, I mean, that's treason, isn't it? What is he doing? He's leaking from the second position at the FBI. He was the deputy director, right? So he's the number 2 guy at the FBI. He's leaking all this stuff just to get Nixon. And, of course, the media hailed him as a hero once he finally came out and admitted who he was. But shouldn't he have faced the music?
2 problems here, Joe. First of all, the purpose of the break-in. Nixon is leading in the polls. He ultimately carries 49 of 50 states. He's not in a close race. So
Right.
What's the purpose of the break-in? I'll tell you. John Dean's wife had worked as a prostitute. Her photograph is in a portfolio of prostitutes for a call girl agency being used by the Democrat National Committee.
Wow.
He wants to get that back. Great book by Phil Stanford wrote called White House Call Girl. Check it out.
Well,
That's point one. Point two, that's the purpose of the break-in. 91-year-old Eugenia Martinez, who is both a CI operative, still on the payroll, but also one of the Watergate burglars. He attempts to swallow the key to the desk drawer where the portfolio that I speak of is being kept.
wow.
Mark Felt is not Deep Throat, by the way.
Really?
No. I hate to say this, but Deep Throat is General Alexander Haig. To the extent that any one individual. Now, I think that Deep Throat is actually a composite of sources, but Woodward and Bernstein, both of whom are congenital liars, first of all, they conveniently never report the fact that the Pentagon has an active spying operation going on inside the White House, and the documents are being photocopied and sent to the Joint Chiefs. They're against ending the war in Vietnam. They're against the Strategic Arms Limitation Agreement. They're against the recognition of China, a dirt poor, backwards, agrarian society with a weak military, no indoor plumbing, no electricity in rural areas. China is not a danger to us at the time that Nixon recognized it. There's no way for Nixon to know that 30 years later, Bill Clinton will give them most favored nation trading status and will illegally sell them our top secret missile targeting technology in return for illegal campaign contributions. That is what makes China dangerous.
It's so deep, Roger. It is so deep. I want to show people the book again so they go and get it. The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, Roger Stone, and Mike Colapietro. I hope I'm saying his name right. I'm Italian. It should be the way it's pronounced. But go and get this book right now. You can go to whokilledkennedy.com or stonezone.com. I wanted to interrupt just for a second because it is so deep. You're the first person I've ever heard, and I'm 58 years old, been doing what I do 36 years. I've never heard that Mark Felt wasn't Deep Throat. So you think it was an aggregation of a bunch of people, and this whole thing goes way deeper than we even know?
There is a great book called Haig's Coup by Ray Locker, who is a USA Today reporter. When this book was published, Bob Woodward arranged for him to get fired from his job at USA Today. He absolutely nails it. No, Alexander Haig's job was to slow walk Richard Nixon to resignation. To the extent that anyone is Deep Throat, he is. Locker proves it overwhelmingly in his book.
That is stunning. So are you connected with Nixon? You've got my brain going, Roger. I don't mean to interrupt, but are you in the White House with Nixon? Are you still advising? Are you still on the team? If so, what input did you have? Mr. President, do this, 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 and this. You might survive this. Or was what did you say? Listen, maybe it's time to step away.
Joe, I was 20 years old. In Richard Nixon's first 72 campaign, I was 19. My relationship with the former president does not begin until his post-presidential years.
Okay.
So I met him and spent substantial time with him beginning in 1977 when I was elected Young Republican National Chairman. But in 1979, one of my assignments in Ronald Reagan's campaign was to go to either Nixon's home in Saddle River, New Jersey, or to his office at 26 Federal Plaza in New York and give him an hour-long briefing on the campaign every week for almost a year. So Amazing. It is in that period that we became very close friends. He was, of course, my political hero. By the way, it's true. I do have a tattoo of him on my back, which is a daily reminder in life when you get knocked down, when you suffer defeats, when you have setbacks and you're discouraged and you want to throw in the towel. Well, that's the time you have to get up off the canvas and get back in the fight.
Yes.
The story of Nixon is a story of resilience and persistence. It's an American story. So even though that tattoo, when I go to the beach, does piss off liberals, but that's the way it goes. To me, it's a testimony about the necessity of persistence in life. Who personifies this better than Donald J. Trump?
I couldn't agree with you more. It's Roger Stone. Go to stonezone.com. Also go to whokilledkennedy.com. Get his book, The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ, Roger Stone and Mike Colapietro. Go and get this right now. And I mean, the whole case that you lay out in the book is one that actually, I think it was Nancy Mace the other day, confused you and the other guy, the director Stone, Oliver Stone. She literally asked him, you say that LBJ was involved in killing Kennedy. Why do you say that? And his team all went, no, that's Roger Stone, not Oliver Stone. So you're the most important Stone right now, I think, in Washington and certainly in my life. So let's get into the 80 campaign. And the reason I want to get into that is I remember, because that's when I was really into politics. I was born in 66. So by 80, I was, ready to really know a lot more than I knew before. And if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, Gerald Ford wanted to either be the vice president with Ronald Reagan, or he wanted Reagan to be his vice president, and he wanted sort of a co-presidency, to which Reagan said, I'm not doing that. And then Reagan, of course, beats Jimmy Carter. Am I remembering that right, Roger? Do you remember Gerald Ford wanting to sort of have a tandem presidency with Reagan?
So Ronald Reagan's victory for the Republican nomination is very similar to Donald Trump's defeat of 16 other more establishment candidates. Reagan beat the party establishment, and then Dr. Henry Kissinger tried to engineer this coup in which they tried to persuade Reagan that he needed to take former President Ford onto the ticket for vice president in order to, quote unquote, appeal to moderate Republicans and independents. Reagan smelled immediately that they were trying to push him into a co-presidency. Kissinger overplayed his hand by saying, well, Governor Reagan, you can handle domestic policy, but I would suggest you let Vice President Ford and I handle foreign policy. Well, that meant a return to the détente that Kissinger favored, which the underpinnings of which were, look, we can't beat the Russians, we can't beat the Chinese, we have to coexist with them. Reagan did not believe that.
Wow.
That's why Reagan famously goes to the Berlin Wall and says, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. This is why Reagan famously goes to Europe and calls the Soviet Union the evil empire. All the while, he has members of his own national security apparatus and his own staff telling him not to do that. But the essence of Reagan as an anti-communist, as an advocate for freedom, led him to reject that effort, which really was an attempt by the Republican establishment to steal back the nomination that Reagan had just won. So it would have been like those who said, Donald Trump in 2024, you should take Nikki Haley on the ticket to bind up the wounds of the party. Really? She got no votes. She has no votes to get. She was attractive to no one as a candidate, made a much better choice in J.D. Vance.
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. When it comes to Reagan and Ford, why was Kissinger pushing for that? Why was the party pushing for that? Reagan was a former Democrat who actually ran California as a conservative Democrat. Here's a guy that was now a staunch conservative, which he always had been, just had a D under his name. Now he has an R. Why wasn't he the right guy to bring people into the large tent? Or was it about we can control Ford better than we can control Reagan? What was that?
I really think it was larger than that. It was a clash of those two ideologies.
Okay.
Kissinger and Ford favored coexistence with the Russians. How did Reagan sum up his theory? He says, this is simple. We win, they lose. Reagan was determined to bring down the Iron Curtain and to destroy the menace, the danger of the Soviet Union. So it was an attempt to co-opt Reagan, and of course it failed. Now, in the end, they persuaded him to take George Bush for vice president. I have a book coming out, hopefully by July, on the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
The title of the book, Joe, is Bushwhacked, the real story of the attempted assassination of Ronald Reagan.
Well, we look forward to that. I want to show people again the book that's out now. It's The Man Who Killed Kennedy. It's a New York Times bestseller. The Case Against LBJ, Roger Stone and Mike Colapietro. You make the case in that book that it was Lyndon Johnson who was behind all this. We now have some information coming out, some audio tapes coming out that actually bolster what you've been saying the entire time. Let's fast forward to the release. I want to get back to the presidency of Donald Trump, his election win in 2016, but I want to jump around a little bit because of the book that you've got out. They just released the Kennedy files, 80,000 pages. You're not going to read them all. I'm not going to read them all. Hopefully people will do a deep dive and find out if there's anything there. On the periphery, have you heard anything about what was released that would solidify what you're saying about LBJ, or would solidify that this one guy Oswald did anything by himself?
I hate to say this, but what they released is woefully inadequate. There
Okay.
are a number of documents, videos, and audios, some of them examined by the Assassination Records Review Board, which was a federal entity that studied the assassination in the 90s, that are not there. The House Select Committee on Assassinations, after an exhaustive investigation, their final report says organized crime was deeply involved in Kennedy's assassination, and they were. None of these documents they release address that whatsoever. The problem here is the president ordered the release of the National Archives JFK Assassination Records collection. That's a good start, but that doesn't include records that we know are at the FBI, the CIA, the State Department, the Defense Department, the IRS, and elsewhere. So what they released is largely designed to bolster the false claim that Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone nut, a communist, a Russian sympathizer, shot John F. Kennedy with 3 shots, all from behind, from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building. That is 100% false.
Wow.
We now have fingerprint evidence, eyewitness evidence, and most recently, audio tape evidence that, first of all, I think there are multiple shooters, but the shooter from the 6th floor is Malcolm Mac Wallace. He left his fingerprints there. He is seen by 6 eyewitnesses there. And you have recently a Johnson crony, Billy Sol Estes, who was under investigation at the time. His grandson produced an audio tape, a conversation between Sol Estes and a man named Cliff Carter, who was a chief political operative for LBJ, in which they openly discussed the fact that Johnson recruited Mac Wallace to shoot John Kennedy. 6 witnesses say they see a man in the window who meets the physical description of Wallace, middle build, balding, wearing spectacles. That's not Lee Harvey Oswald.
Right. Exactly right. So why would LBJ want him out of the way? I know it's a broad question, but I mean, Kennedy brings him on as vice president. He's already got the second top position. He could run in 68 or whenever Kennedy's done. Why did they want him out of the way? What was Kennedy doing wrong?
He was investigating Lyndon Johnson for corruption in the Billy Sol Estes and the Bobby Baker scandal. Robert Kennedy had already begun telling people that not only was LBJ going to be dropped from the ticket, but he was likely going to prison. So from LBJ's point of view, it was kill or be killed. Who was it who recommended the trip to Texas? It was LBJ. Who was it who recommended the motorcade route through Dealey Plaza? Joe, they were going from the Fort Worth Dallas airport to the Merchandise Mart, both outside the city of Dallas. Why even go into the city of Dallas?
Yeah.
Evelyn Lincoln, President Kennedy's personal assistant, a personal secretary, writes a letter on the plane going back to Washington listing the people she suspects. Who's number 1 on her list? Vice President Lyndon Johnson. It's more than I can tell you in an interview. It's all in my book.
Yeah, go get the book.
Again, the place to go is themanwhokilledkennedy.com, themanwhokilledkennedy.com, or go to stonezone.com and you can get it in the store. The key thing, though, is always get the paperback version. It has 3 extra chapters that I wrote after the hardcover.
Let me ask you this, and it's Roger Stone, the amazing Roger Stone. Go to those websites he just said. Get this book right now. Make sure you check out his radio show every weekend on WABC in New York as well. I was born, as I said, in '66, so obviously this all happened before I was born. But I've been I've been interested in news since I was 10. As I said, I've been in this business for 36 years. Why is it that I don't know more about that assassination? Are they really that good at burying things that deeply that a guy who does information and news for a living, and I've won many awards for excellence in journalism, I had no idea until you told me recently, well, in the past 5 years, that LBJ was the guy. Why don't I know that? How did they hide that so well?
Well, several different ways. First of all, people keep saying to me when I give a book talk or I talk about the book, they say, well, if this were true, why wouldn't more people know about it? Many people did know about it. Many people died because they talked about it. For example, there were 3 officers law enforcement officers who say they found a rifle on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building, but it wasn't the $24 World War II vintage Carcano Italian Army carbine. It was a precision German Mauser. There's actually a photo, an AP photo of one of the officers holding it up over his head.
Wow.
One of those officers recanted. He later said, no, I was mistaken. That was wrong. The other two were murdered. Simple cat. Just a perfect example. So many people died in this cover-up, but also the role of the mainstream media, particularly CNN, who's among the worst. Anybody who questioned the official narrative that Lee Harvey Oswald, acting alone, killed Kennedy, how would you communicate that before there was an internet? The answer is you wouldn't. Gerald Posner, who's a very smart guy, wrote the book Case Closed. If you want to find that book, you can go to the fiction section over at Barnes and Noble. He claims the Warren Commission is correct. I've debated him a couple of times. By the way, he's not a bad guy. He's a very smart guy. On this issue, he just happens to be wrong.
Yeah.
But I appreciate the fact that the president is trying to do the right thing. I just think he's been undermined by deep state bureaucrats still in the system who have a vested interest in protecting one of the institutions involved. What I'm saying is, this is important. I'm not saying Lyndon Johnson, acting alone or with his own Confederates, killed Kennedy. What I'm saying is Lyndon Johnson was at the head of a plot that involved the Central Intelligence Agency, organized crime, and Big Texas Oil, all of whom had their own individual motives. But Johnson's motive is the most acute. He's a man staring in the abyss. The Senate hearings investigating his corruption open on November 22nd, 1963.
Wow. It is Roger Stone. Go to stonezone.com or go to themanwhokilledkennedy.com. Get this book right now. And as he said, get the paperback. There are 3 extra chapters. So as we go through the history of all of that, and now we're where we are, the 80,000 pages I'm learning from you just for the National Archives, does everything else exist, do you think? And if it does, the president's the only person on the planet that can declassify anything he wants. Can he declassify it and force them to release it?
I think he can, but we have to question whether it still exists. I'll give you an example. There's a man named Orville Nix. He was standing on the other side of the limousine, directly across from Abraham Zapruder. He was filming with an 8mm camera, but his camera has a zoom lens, which means he has a close-up. I believe that his video would tell us what was recently in that Paramount documentary, what the Parkland doctors saw. Every doctor who attended JFK at Parkland Hospital in Dallas, who's still living, which is a surprising number of them, all say they saw wounds consistent with Kennedy being shot from the front and the back, which means multiple shooters, which means a conspiracy. Where's the Nix film? The government has it. Why wasn't it released among these archives?
Well, Roger, there's been speculation that the Zapruder film is the only one that we saw because he was like paid to be there to document it, to be the official documentarian of what happened that day, which would fit the narrative that you spell out in the book. So do you believe that Zapruder, it wasn't just happenstance, that was going to be the official film?
Zapruder's film has been altered. They sent it to Rochester, to Kodak, and there are missing frames. So they doctored the film to try to fit the single bullet theory. Before his death, by the way, I actually got Arlen Specter, later the senator from Pennsylvania, but then essentially the chief counsel to the Warren Commission, to admit, when I went through it with him frame by frame, that video had been altered. It's also why the Nix video has never surfaced. Carlos Marcello, the gangster who controlled organized crime in both Louisiana and Texas, they bugged his jail cell both before and after the assassination. He brags that it's coming before the assassination. He crows about it after. Where are those audios? Why weren't they released with this broad order by President Trump? Two examples of.
I love that you're shining a light on it, Roger. Go get his book. It's the New York Times bestseller, The Man Who Killed Kennedy. Go to themanwhokilledkennedy.com and The Case Against LBJ by Roger Stone. Let's fast forward to 2016. Do you think he's going to win? Do you feel like he can win? Do you think that it's a good run to maybe wake up America, but he probably can't beat the Clinton machine? Or did you know that Donald Trump could take the office?
I actually always thought that he would be a strong candidate. I did think he would win. I knew the Friday before the election that he would win. If you understand how to read polling, it was very clear to me that she was stalled and that he was gaining. And of course, in the final days, Joe, he simply outworked her. She was so overconfident that she spent the weekend in Chappaqua going through fabric samples to pick out the material for the curtains in the Oval Office. Meanwhile, Donald Trump is barnstorming Democrat strongholds in Milwaukee, in Philadelphia, in Miami, Fort Lauderdale. It reminds me that when Harry Truman pulled the great upset in 1948, he made a famous dash across the country, leaving Washington, D.C. by train, going all the way to California. And he kept escorting the engineers to go faster, so that they could hit as many towns and cities as they could. Trump knows that under FAA regulations that pilots can only fly a certain number of hours before they have to go down for sleep. So Trump keeps switching out the pilots so that he can keep campaigning. Smart. And he's calling ahead. So on a Tuesday, he says, call the people in Milwaukee, tell them we'll be there at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, and 45,000 people show up at the airport. That's when I knew that he would win. He simply outworked her in the closing days, and she took it all for granted.
Right.
By 2016, the American people didn't want any more dynasties, no more Bushes, no more Clintons. They didn't trust the Republicans or the Democrats. They were sick of the media. That's probably the most important development. They no longer believed big media. Donald Trump was the right man at the right time with the right message, and everybody knew he wasn't running because he wanted a fancier house or a nicer plane or a higher name ID. He was the best known businessman on the face of the planet. So it was very clear to people he wasn't running out of his personal ambition. He was running because he loved America and he hated to see what was happening to it.
You know, what's amazing is, and you just highlighted this expertly, he goes to the Rust Belt. He's on the tarmac in Grand Rapids, Michigan, the morning of the election. Well, as you said, Hillary Clinton is out of sight, out of mind. I thought that she was probably writing her inauguration speech. At the end of the day, he steals the Midwest from her, and she had every reason to win it had she just gone. Roger, I don't think she went to Wisconsin or Michigan. I don't know that she went there at all. And he got the workers there to believe that the billionaire from New York who sits on a golden toilet is more in tune with them than Hillary Clinton is. And I just thought that was masterful. In that run for president, how much did he lean on you? How much did he whisper in your ear? How much did you say, this might make sense, that might make sense? I know that you didn't tell him what to do, but advising is what you do. How much of that input were you able to give, and how often? Like 5 times a week, 2 times a week, every day? How does that go?
Well, I left the campaign in 2015, frankly, because I was publishing my book, The Clintons' War on Women. And I didn't want people to say that this was somehow directed or at the insistence of Donald Trump. Now, I was very gratified when he waved the book around and said, if you want to know about the crimes of the Clintons, it's all here. By the way, the longest chapter in the book, Joe, is about Jeffrey Epstein and his connection to Bill and Hillary Clinton. And I have to tell you, I interviewed this woman, Virginia Giuffre. I interviewed her for 12 hours. I have 12 hours of audio tape. I also read every single word of her sworn testimony. I do not believe she committed suicide, but I can tell you this. She is the single most damning witness against William J. Clinton.
But let me stop you there just to inform the audience. Virginia was one of the Epstein victims. She's in a picture with Prince Andrew. She, as you said, was the most dynamic and most explosive witness against Epstein, against the Clintons, against everybody when it comes to that disgusting case. She somehow was in a horrible accident, wasn't going to live very long. She said, I'll be dead in 4 days, and then allegedly commits suicide after getting out of the hospital on the mend. And you're saying right here, right now, that you don't believe she committed suicide.
I really don't. I think she was murdered because she is the single most explosive witness. The list of A-listers beyond Prince Andrew that she connects to Epstein, but most specifically, I went back and read her testimony against Bill Clinton showing up at the island. This is the reason I think that she was murdered.
It's Roger Stone. Go and get this book right now. It's called The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. Roger Stone with Michael Pietro. Go and get it at themanwhokilledkennedy.com. Roger John, you've got to go and set up your show. Let me ask you one last question I've been asking everybody this week. The first 100 days, I give the guy an A. I think it's a bit of a fumble how they brought out the tariffs, although on April 2nd, he explains it very, very well for the American people, which made much better sense. Other than that, I think the president did what he said he would do. How would you grade the first 100 days?
I give him an A. Just closing the border, just that alone, and beginning to deport the most violent criminals, ending men playing in women's sports, going back to drilling for gas and oil.
Yes.
Just go down his platform. I hate to say this because I love Ronald Reagan. He accomplished more in the first 100 days than Reagan did in 8 years, and he's just warming up.
What about these garbage polls? Oh, it's the worst 100 days in 80 years. What is that? I mean, you and I know that he said what he was going to do, and then he did it. I don't know any Trump voter who today regrets their vote. In fact, many regret voting for Biden now that they see what Trump's doing. Where do these polls come from? You've often said polls are garbage. You shouldn't pay attention to them. But what do you see in that? Is that a fake poll?
Well, the New York Times poll, which is the leading poll that shows that Trump is unpopular with the American people, according to that poll, 37% of the people in the overall sample voted for Trump. Well, we know that Trump got more than 37% of the vote.
Yes.
So
yeah.
polls are easily manipulated by the wording of the questions, the order of the questions, the correctness of the sample. By the way, the polls we're talking about, those are the same polls that told us that Kamala Harris would defeat Donald Trump.
Exactly right. It is Roger Stone. Your knowledge is amazing. I love having you on anytime. Go and get the book right now. It is The Case Against LBJ. The full name is The Man Who Killed Kennedy, The Case Against LBJ. Roger Stone with Michael Pietro. Go and get it right now. Get the paperback. There are more chapters in there, more information in there, more knowledge in there. Roger, I can't thank you enough for making the time today. Let's do it again soon, my man.
Joe, always great to be with you. God bless you.
Amazing to have you. God bless you back. That's going to do it for this episode of Unshaken and Unafraid with Joe Pags. Thanks for joining. Make sure that you lock this in. Set notifications up to get notified when we do another one of these 3 times a week. You're going to get them, and we'll do it again soon. Keep it here.